you've done that race?
Not good.
Can you tell us why?
I mean, we were slow. Ultimately a disappointing result, as I mentioned yesterday, to feeling so optimistic. I think through practice after P2, honestly, I felt so good in the car, and I think ultimately we took in the wrong direction with the car, and then but our ultimate pace in the race was just not on par with the guys up ahead of us. But qualifying clearly is so important. If you look at where the Williams was, they did a great job. Congratulations to them. What an amazing result for us, to give everything. I mean, I'm happy I moved forwards from 12th, but I couldn't really care less for that position.
How much this weekend was to do with the tyres? Because I know yesterday you and Charles both after qualifying said you were on a tyre you didn't want to be on in your final runs, and then today you were on offset strategies. Do you think the team have missed an opportunity by actually not putting the optimal tyre on for you at the right time?
I mean, we'll internally we'll go and have a look and see what we could have done differently. As I said yesterday, for sure, operationally we could have done a better job, and so that's something we need to work on. But I do, as I said, I felt like I made progress today. I mean, out of our cars, my pace was decent, but the others were just rapid, and it was so hard to overtake here today. It's an unusual Baku race where just not really much overtaking and really hard to follow. But definitely disappointed to come away with nothing.
Can a simple mistake in the last return of a race reveal the beginning of Ferrari's collapse? Is Lewis Hamilton regretting having left Mercedes by Maranello? It all started with what, for many, would be an insignificant detail, a team instruction in the last return of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. But in Formula One, details are everything. And this little synchronization failure ended up undressing the cracks of a relationship that is still in diapers, that of Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari. Hamilton marched 8th. Leclerc just behind 9th. At first glance, exchange these positions did not involve a dramatic impact on the championship. But the context changes everything. Leclerc had given up his position before Hamilton, with fresher tires, could try an attack on the cars that preceded him. A classic team play, one yields for the other attack. The implicit treatment is that, if the attack does not prosper, the position is returned. But the key is how, when and with what clarity that return is communicated. Ferrari's radio broke out late. Charles is 2.5 behind you, it's the last round, let it pass. At that moment, the reaction margin was practically null. Hamilton tried to meet. He raised his foot, reduced the march. But it wasn't enough. 4/10 prevented the movement from completing before crossing the checkered flag. And Leclerc was 9th. The controversy exploded. Not so much for the order of arrival, but for what it meant. What should be a routine procedure ended up exposing something much more important. A lack of operational confidence between pilot and engineers. In champions teams, these errors do not occur. The decisions are anticipated, they are tested, they refine the millimeter. In Ferrari, he simply improvised. And Hamilton made it clear with his confession. I calculated it badly. He will not happen again. There were no excuses, but neither did a defense. Only a phrase full of frustration and a dose of resignation. The most interesting thing about this statement was not the recognition of the error, but what he did not say. Hamilton did not mention at any time that the order was late. He did not accuse the team. But those who follow the F1 carefully know how to read between the lines. Instead of blaming the system, he chose to absorb responsibility. And that, coming from a 7-time champion, is revealing. He says a lot about his mentality, but also of his discomfort. In Maranello they wanted a star. And they have it. But with Hamilton, not only talent comes, the demand arrives. The standard of a pilot comes to operate in almost perfect structures, such as Mercedes. And that does not easily fit with a team where communication errors are still present even in the simplest moments. Baku's mistake was not simply a bad calculation. It was a reminder that, in Formula One, the harmony between pilot and equipment is not built with names or promises, but with surgical precision in every detail. And that precision, for now, Ferrari does not have it yet. Visible mistakes are the easiest to correct, but the truly dangerous are those that hide under the surface. And in Ferrari, the fractures that Lewis Hamilton has begun to detect are not in the results or in equipment orders. They are in the heart of SF-25, and that is much more worrying. During Saturday's classification in Baku, which should have been a simple adjustment session, was transformed into a call for help. The radio message was direct, sincere, and left Ferrari's engineers ice cream. I am fighting with the rear. Any advice? Please check me a hand. But it was not just what happened on the track. The true tragedy was in the box. Ferrari had the data. I knew that the car's behavior was unpredictable under braking pressure. He knew that lateral load transfer peaks were not stabilized. And yet they made strategic decisions that only worsened the situation. In Q2, when all the leading teams were half tires to optimize balance and durability, Ferrari opted for soft for Hamilton. A risky choice that only made sense if the car was perfectly balanced. And it wasn't. Hamilton said it bluntly, the average tires were clearly faster. They told us that the difference was about 0.3. It felt much better and we should have used it in Q2. This phrase is more than a criticism. It is a break. A gap between what the pilot perceives and what the team decides. In a sport where the margins are thousandths, those gaps become abysses. The lack of effective feedback between engineers and pilot was evidenced. The SF-25, by design, has a rear structure that seeks flexibility to gain traction in slow sections. But that design, which in theory should provide advantage in closed curves such as Baku, is generating the opposite effect. Instability at the most critical point of braking, just when pilots need maximum precision. And this is not just a problem of tuning. It is a conceptual problem. A ruling that is not fixed in a session of free or in a race weekend. Requires redesign. Requires rethinking. And above all, it takes time. Time that Ferrari does not have. Hamilton is finding a car that does not obey his hands. With engineers who are not speaking their same language. With strategies that do not respond to the reality of track, but to theoretical forms that ignore the most important thing, the pilot's confidence. When a champion of his caliber begins to doubt his machinery, what follows are not just bad results. What follows is a loss of faith. And without faith in Formula One, there is no way to compete at the highest level. This second act does not tell us about an error. It tells us about a structural disconnection between what Ferrari believes that it is, and what is really delivering. And that disconnection, if not corrected soon, can devour any project, even one built around the biggest champion of its generation. Every great story needs a spark that turns on the flame. In Ferrari they believe to have it, the signing of Lewis Hamilton. The 7-time champion, an absolute icon of a golden era in Mercedes, dressed in red. The announcement was received with worldwide enthusiasm. The most emblematic team in history linked forces with one of the most laureate pilots of all time. It seemed a perfect movement. It seemed fate aligning. But what should have been a brilliant start has become, in just 3 races, a series of episodes that reveal an uncomfortable truth. The relationship between Hamilton and Ferrari is not working as expected. The communication error in Baku was only a visible expression of something much deeper. A disconnection between the pilot's philosophy and the team's operational culture. Lewis arrived in Maranello waiting for a high-precision environment, similar to the one he built for more than a decade in Mercedes. A place where information flows clearly, where decisions are made based on solid data, and where the relationship between pilot and engineer is a symbiosis. What he found is something else. Ferrari, despite his advances in recent years, continues to carry a structural inheritance that often prioritizes intuition over the data, the reaction on anticipation. That way of operating can work with certain pilots, but not with Hamilton. Not with someone who needs absolute clarity, consistency, and efficiency to display its maximum potential. In addition, there is another silent but powerful factor. The presence of Charles Leclerc. A young, talented and years-old pilot within the team. He represents Ferrari's internal stability. Know every corner, each procedure, each technical figure. And although publicly maintains a conciliatory position, the reality is that both compete for the natural leadership of the team. What happened in Azerbaijan's last return was a reflection of that covert tension. Leclerc gave its position with the expectation of a return. Hamilton did not succeed. It was a technical failure, yes, but also a moment that soused doubts. Would the same have happened if the positions were invested? Would Ferrari ask Leclerc to let Hamilton pass in an identical situation? That question, even if you have no official answer, is already floating within the team. And in Formula One, when the pilots begin to question their role within the internal hierarchy, the atmosphere quickly thins. Hamilton, meanwhile, has shown professionalism. He has not launched public darts. He has assumed responsibility for mistakes. And that is the real problem. Hamilton didn't come to learn. He came to win. Ferrari, on the other hand, is still building. They are learning how to operate precisely. How to make decisions that are executed in tenths of a second. How to transform potential into consistency. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix was not a simple career. It was not any date on the calendar. It was a turning point. One of those moments in which, without many noticeable at the beginning, a very different story begins to be written than everyone expected. Ferrari says that what happened in Baku was an isolated mistake. That technical problems are identified. That communications will be adjusted. That there is time. There is room. But the reality of Formula One is more cruel than any press statement. It is not promises here. These are results. And the results so far are not appearing. And that leaves us with a question that still has no answer, but that already begins to worry. Is Lewis Hamilton regretting having left Mercedes? Or is he about to star in one of the most shocking comebacks in his entire career? Leave it to the comments because this is just beginning.